So this is the last kind of bit of input over this Ekklesia couple of days, and then we're going to have a little bit of a kind of worship time at the end and a bit of a kind of what one or two things are we going to do having been here for the last couple of days. But with my charity Share Jesus, we've been exploring some research looking at how are Christians sharing their faith and what can we do to best help Christians in sharing their faith. So you might be aware that on the slides we're going to have now, this piece of research we've been doing, looking at faith sharing, there are lots of biblical ideas for how we share our faith. And the guys from Louis Palau on a couple of slides down have identified these different styles of faith sharing. On the slide, next slide down. The idea of the intellectual evangelist, the proclamation evangelist, the storyteller, the good works, the innovator, the friendship, and the counselor, all coming from biblical ideas. So, for example, Paul in Athens would be the intellectual evangelist. Peter on the day of Pentecost would be the proclamation evangelist. Different ways of sharing our faith, looking at Scripture. What we've done is wanted to understand, well, actually, what are people doing as they share their faith? What is going on kind of currently in our culture? So we've done a piece of research, and the idea is kind of three-part. The first part is the idea of the theories. So having worked in this field for about 25 years, I've been exploring different ideas, I've been kind of wanting to meddle with actually what is going on. So I came to some ideas of what could be some of the ways we're sharing our faith. Then we did a questionnaire, which got filled in by about 265 people, which is really helpful to understand what are some of the things that are going on in people's lives as they share their faith. It's really kind of helping to work out what are practicing Christians doing as they look to share Jesus. And it's quite a good sample size we've had. And on the back of there, we went into some in-depth interviews with about 10 people to explore some of the things that are happening as this occurs. My good friend Kit did the research. Next slide down. Kit used to work with me on the Pentecost Festival a few years ago. There is Kit. Give him a wave. He's not actually there, but wave anyway. This is not interactive at all, just him on a screen. And you might think, hang on a sec. Do I know Kit? Well, I was supposed to say you probably don't, but you might know this guy here. On the next slide down, that's Val Kilmer, and I think he looks pretty similar. But anyway, there you go. That's an aside. So with the questionnaire, we had these questions that have 5 ways of answering. Do you strongly agree? Do you agree? Do you neither agree or disagree? Do you disagree, or do you strongly disagree? Okay, so there's 5 possible answers for each question. And there are certain things we found that actually almost everybody had the same answer on. So, for example, is it important for every Christian to share their faith? Most Christians agreed with that. So what we were looking for in these questionnaires was the answers which had different people's responses. So next slide down. Here are some examples. I actively try to bring my friends and family to faith. There's a real spread of answers there. Next slide down. Most of my friends are not Christians. Real mixture of responses. Next slide down. I need organised event or activity to share my faith. Again, a real mixture of answers. Next slide down. I prefer having a conversation about my faith one-to-one. Again, quite a large spread of different answers. Next slide down. There is a definitive answer about most questions about faith. Again, a real spread of answers. Next slide down. I share my faith with everybody I meet. Another massive spread. Next slide down. I would rather somebody felt loved than they understood the gospel. Again, a real mixture of different results. So this is from practicing Christians. Next slide down. I think it's more important to demonstrate the gospel to somebody than tell them the gospel. Again, a real mixture of different answers. This is done across different denominations and different streams of church, but by practicing Christians. Next slide down. So that was the kind of the interview, the questionnaire findings, that actually there was a real spread on some of those answers. So on the back of that, my friend Kit did 10 in-depth interviews with different people to try and understand why there were these different answers to these different questions. And we discovered, as we did this research, that there are 4 tensions when it comes to sharing our faith. The next slide down explains that these tensions start with the everyday attitudes and behaviors of real people. This is what actual Christians are doing as they share their faith. The second thing is they are not idealistic theology or a projection of where we want to be, but they're just kind of the insights of what is actually happening. And these tensions don't necessarily need to be resolved, but need to be held in tension. Make sense? So we're going to go through these 4 different things. The first tension was the idea of response. Do people come to faith in a moment, or is it about a journey of gradually coming to faith? You might say, well, yeah, it's a bit of both and, isn't it? Well, it probably is, but some people focus much more on a moment. So perhaps it's about a moment in a church service or a moment on the street where you say, would you like to come to Christ? And it's a yes or no moment. But for others, it's much more about a gradual journey of faith exploration. Perhaps you come to faith via osmosis, where someone would say, you kind of gradually absorb it as you go through a journey of exploring more. So here are some of the kind of comments that came up. Inviting people is the DNA of my church community. But actually, many would say sharing faith means bringing them to hear the vicar, the Billy Graham rally mindset, if you like. So some churches really operate this idea of it is about a moment. If we can get the people into the venue at the right moment, then there's a moment for them to respond to the gospel. Next comment down. I think it's not sufficient of me to just signal my faith. It's not enough to just offer to pray. If it doesn't come with anything else, then their faith isn't challenged. There is no decision. But that is often what I do. This person had this kind of tension where they understood the importance of a moment, perhaps. They thought it was about a moment of coming to faith, but they almost felt it difficult. Well, how do I challenge somebody to come to faith? When does that moment take place? Next comment down. We know they have a journey, not a yes-no thing. Baptism or prayer or whatever is fine, but recognizing that the journey is real is critical. Not hurrying things for response. That doesn't need to happen. What's the next bit of the journey? This person really emphasized the importance that faith is a gradual journey. And if we're not kind of careful, we can try and rush the process by giving moments that perhaps aren't always appropriate. So our first tension is the idea of, is it a moment or is it a journey? The second tension that kind of got revealed in this research was this, is whose responsibility is this? Is this a personal responsibility or is it a corporate responsibility? So the idea on the personal end of things is people think, well, this is my job, they're my friends, they're my contacts, I must share my faith with them. This is something for me to do with them. On the other side, it was much more about, well, it's not really my job, it's our job as a local church, as a local Ekklesia. We need to work together. And I might be helpful on one part of that journey, but actually it's about a corporate activity we do in sharing more of who Christ is. So some of the comments that came on the back of this. We are commanded to. It's part of our responsibility as Christians. Can you be a Christian without responding to this? The idea of personal evangelism for this person was really important. It's what we are to do. I've got to be sharing my faith personally, not just relying upon the corporate experience. Next comment down. It's a vital part of being a Christian. It's not a club to meet other Christians. It's not about getting comfortable. Again, the idea that it's not always comfortable, but it's about personal evangelism. How do I share my faith even when it's awkward? Anyone ever find it awkward? Some of you find it awkward sometimes? Yeah, okay. Next slide down. An effective way is going as a group. As a church community, we respond together and activate together. So this person's on the completely other end of the spectrum. That is about a corporate thing that we do, and we do it as a group of people working collaboratively, doing it together. And we almost invite people into what is happening if we do things together as the church. The third tension is the starting point. Do we start with the message or do we start with the person? So the idea of the message of the thing is that some people approach evangelism thinking this is what I must communicate. I must communicate these biblical truths in this moment. I must communicate what sin is and what is done on the cross and what it means for them and what salvation looks like. I must communicate all of these things. And almost the starting point is what I have to communicate. On the other end of the tension, the starting point is the person. So they don't come with a pre-understanding of what the kind of gospel is. They come thinking, actually, what is God doing in this person's life? What is already happening here? what perhaps might be the next kind of thing to ask them about on their faith journey. Perhaps what was the next thing I might work with them on. So here are some of the comments that came on the back of this. The urgency of telling people you love them. The importance of telling them the truth, telling them what's what, no matter what. If they accept it or not, that's not my issue. But I must be faithful in presenting what the gospel is, starting with the message. Next slide down. Being in a relationship can blunt the impact of what you say and can prohibit saying things bluntly too. You want to protect the relationship. This person, I guess, is starting more with the person, but they're very aware that they don't want to say it too bluntly what the gospel is all about because it might actually impact or offend the person or break down the relationship in some way. This third quote from this researcher is here. Doing something my church suggested, sharing about Jesus with people I know by using a candy cane at Christmas, that just feels so unnatural. It's really not normal for me. It feels so forced. Oh, this was a great idea from the guys in Sheffield. They had a candy cane, and it kind of, one way around it's a J for Jesus, and the other way around it's a kind of candy cane like a shepherd has a kind of a shepherd's crook, and the idea that was a way to explain the gospel. But this person felt this is really not how they would do things. They were starting with the person, not with the message. It felt really forced to try and shove this message onto this person in this relationship. It wasn't the way they wanted things to happen. Next slide down. This fourth tension, which I'm probably more aware of, is the idea of do we share our faith with words or with actions? And again, obviously it's kind of a bit of both and, but the idea of words, that we have to tell them what we believe, we have to speak out what we believe and why we believe it. Or is it actually about the way that we live? And that could be in twofold. It could be, for example, if we're doing a social action project and caring for people, then that action is enough in itself. Or it could be that just the way we live our lives shows people something of God's grace at work in our life. Again, another tension there. So some of the quotes that came on the back of that. I believe the Spirit and the Word can use any situation. We have to be faithful. The idea that words are powerful. No matter what, we have to speak the words of the gospel into the different contexts we find ourselves. Next slide down. I'm not somebody that goes out and shares my faith down someone's throat. It starts with relationships. I build trust, and then people find out I'm a Christian. They start to see good things in me. Good things in me. That actually the way I live speaks powerfully. I haven't always got to use words. The way I live begins to provoke questions about why I live the way I live. Next quote down. I don't think I do the high street stuff. I couldn't do that. I don't think it's wrong, but I'm not 100% convinced it's the right approach. Preaching on the high street is awkward. I mean, as a Christian, I don't stop and listen. This person had, a kind of strong reaction about the whole words first approach. And I guess both ways, some people will be kind of anti-just action, some people are anti-just words. But it's this tension that we find in our churches. So the next slide down are these four tensions. Is it about a moment or a journey? Is it about personal responsibility or corporate? Do we start with the message or do we start with the person? Do we do it with words or do we do it with actions? And most of us won't be on either end of the spectrum, but they'll be somewhere in between these. So with this research going forward, what we're going to be doing is looking at 6 different personas. So what we've worked out, there are 6 different general approaches that Christians have to how they share their faith. And we're creating a personal quiz. So you can do this quiz and discover what is your personal kind of persona for how you share your faith. What are some of the pros and cons and things to be aware of? What we're trying to do is work out a process whereby that data can come to the church leader. So you won't know exactly how everyone fits, but you have an idea of in your congregation what are your natural inclinations and how can you help people going forwards. But what I'd love to do in this session right now, as you run your roundtables, is to have one of these cards, which can be handed out now by my willing volunteers, and to answer 3 questions on the next slide down. So one more slide down. Thank you. Yeah. Is there another slide with the questions or? No? Maybe not. Okay, I'd like to do 3 things. I'd like you to put yourself on these 4 lines. You personally, not when you think about a Sunday morning, but as you live out your faith, as you share your faith, where would you put yourself on these 4 tensions? Second of all, I'd love you to be able to circle where you think your church or your ministry generally fits on these 4 lines. And thirdly, I'd love you to have a conversation of how do these tensions play out in your local church. Make sense? So first of all, put yourself, a little dot on the line, where you think you are gradually on those 4 tensions. Second of all, as a church community, where would you kind of put yourself generally as a church corporately? And third of all, kind of what do these tensions look like as you explore kind of church dynamics, perhaps in your leadership team or your church community? Do these 4 tensions speak true, and how do they impact how you do things? Discuss for 15 minutes. Got it?